Marriage Story. So this film is a Netflix film, which I don't watch Netflix very often. It's one of those things that if you recommend it to me, I will check it out. That's kind of how I am with modern film regardless, though. But physical media all the way. So this film stars Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver. And this was kind of like one of those ones that just kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. People just started talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a huge Adam Driver fan. Adam Driver, in my opinion, is probably amongst the best actors, if not the best, up-and-coming actor in Hollywood right now. I love pretty much everything he's done. Even the Star Wars films, which I hate them, the recent Star Wars films, but I love his performances at least. So there's that.
He's like the only bright spot, honestly.
He really is. So it's like...
It's like the prequels, where like, at least we had Ewan McGregor.
Exactly.
He's the Ewan McGregor of this generation.
He's Emo McGregor.
Okay.
I
So,
mean, I'm wrong.
I watched this film with my girlfriend. And,
Cheating on me?
yes. But, we watched this film together, and it's kind of an interesting film to watch with your significant other.
Hey, so we're going to be in 10 years.
I highly recommend it. Nah, we're not going to get divorced. It's all good. That's why I have a prenup, so none of this film happened. If they would have just gotten a prenup...
That's actually pretty accurate.
This would have been a short film.
Remember, kids, always get a prenup. Never trust her. Always be prepared, because sometimes things don't last. Just farted.
No, it was my hand.
Okay, I was just like,
Jesus.
we have to restart the video now?
Oh no, we'd be keeping it in.
That'd be phenomenal.
So, what are your initial thoughts on the film?
Honestly, I feel like this film kind of affected me a little bit more than the average viewer. And let me just kind of explain what it is and stuff just before I get into it, because I feel like it's kind of necessary.
It's a Kylo Ren Black Widow team-up film where they end up getting divorced at the end.
Makes everybody really sad. No, I mean, basically Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson played this, couple who have been married for about 10 years, and it's kind of a story of their marriage through their divorce. And basically they're going through this divorce process, and they have a young son who is kind of stuck in the middle, and both of them care deeply about this child, and they kind of want to make this, basically do this the most amicably as they possibly can for their child. This hit home a little bit more for me than I think some other people, just because my parents are divorced, and they got divorced about roughly the same time frame, same age frame as this kid and the parents would have been getting divorced. And I think it just kind of gave me a better insight into, how the whole process works and what my parents must have actually had to go through.
Because you only understand it from your point of view.
Exactly.
So it's interesting to see how it could be the other point of view.
Exactly.
I didn't grow up with both parents either, but I was much, much younger. So I didn't experience it personally, but, I can relate to some of the relationship experiences, to be honest.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've never been married or divorced, but, I'm not in my first relationship. Everyone has a relationship that breaks down eventually.
That's true.
And sometimes you recover from that breakdown and sometimes you don't. And this film's a good example of a time you just can't recover, no matter how much you want to.
Hey, Brad and Angelina, they made it work.
Oh my god.
I made a stupid joke, so that's why we're here right now.
The acting. I feel like, I haven't seen much of Adam Driver, because like I said, I don't watch too much modern film. I mostly stick to, historic films and more obscure shit, I guess. And, this was my first time seeing Adam Driver in a film that was not Star Wars. So, I really see him in a completely different light. Even Scarlett Johansson, her acting was phenomenal as well. And, I mean, you might not agree with this, but I don't think Scarlett Johansson was quite as good as Adam Driver was in the film.
I actually kind of completely agree with you. And I don't necessarily know if let me put it this way. watching Adam Driver in this film, it feels like he is the role. It doesn't feel like he's acting. It feels like he's living this. Like we're watching this actually on screen. When Scarlett Johansson is on screen, it feels like she's acting. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a diss towards Scarlett Johansson. I just don't necessarily think she was the best casting for this. I feel like they could have cast somebody who would have necessarily played the role a little bit better. And again, I don't blame that on her. I just think, she did an excellent job for what she did and stuff, and that's definitely something to be praiseworthy about. It's just, when in comparison to Adam Driver, it's not as good.
And I feel like their chemistry can be spot on sometimes, and then sometimes it just doesn't feel like it's there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
100%.
I think that's pretty accurate.
And that to me is I don't know. I can tell you, I love this film, but there were some points where I was like, maybe she wasn't the best choice. And
I think that's fair.
I think the thing I loved most about the film was you're not just seeing one side of the relationship. You're seeing both.
Yeah.
And it makes you care about both equally. It villainizes both of them, but at the same time you see why they're villainized and how they're villainized.
Yeah, it definitely does.
And you do grow sympathy for both. I grew more sympathy for Adam Driver personally.
So did I. I feel like some of his lines are just better too, though. But here's the thing. And I want to basically throw this because we might go into some spoilers here with this. But
Oh, we're going to.
yeah, we definitely will have to at some point. So, I feel like with his performance, you are made to almost look down upon him at first.
Mm-hmm.
And as the film goes along, it kind of flips, would you say? Yeah, I feel like as the film goes on longer, you start to see Scarlett Johansson's character more as the villain. In this kind of act, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I wouldn't say villain,
But you know what I mean.
more in the wrong.
Exactly.
And, to get back to the acting, the argument scene when they're at his new place and she comes over, they basically talk. It's probably like 2/3 through the film.
Roughly.
Maybe a little later. That scene is some of the best acting I've seen in a long time.
Yeah. That's probably the best acted scene of the year, in my opinion.
And, Adam Driver, he gave it his all in this scene.
Well, he gives a line in the film that I think is probably the most impactful line of the decade. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
I mean, I don't really go by time spans personally, but I would say, in recent memory, it was very impactful and very true.
I mean, he gives a line, this will bring into some spoiler and stuff here, which is, you should not care that I fucked her. You should care if I had a laugh with her.
And they're talking about his mistress, of course. Which I feel like maybe they could have had another scene with the mistress as well.
Yeah, I feel like we needed just a little bit more development. But we did get some, though, so I don't necessarily consider that a fault. It's just I wanted something a little bit
I think I would have done a little more with her. Maybe see it from her point of view a little bit.
Yeah, I think that would have been interesting.
Which you got some snippets, but I feel like at times it felt like there might have been some deleted scenes that they just took out for pacing.
Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate.
Which the pacing I thought was decent.
I actually relatively rather enjoyed the pacing.
Yeah. There's some time jumps, but I think they work. It's a divorce. Yeah. You're going to have time jumps.
Exactly. It's not like, 1 minute we're having a conversation, and then, next Tuesday we're finishing the conversation. It's, it's this part of the divorce process, and then it's the next part of the divorce process, and so on.
And symbolism. That's my thing, symbolism. That's the number one thing that I love to include in a film. There was just so many subtle things, like the painting above Laura Dern's head, who was Scarlett Johansson's character's lawyer. Just the painting above her head just symbolized divorce perfectly. There was a point in the beginning of the film where there's Adam Driver and his then wife, they're just standing so far apart in this great wide shot, and it's beautiful. Just little nods to symbolism there I really liked. And I think that's what separates a good film and a great film in a lot of ways. And I would say this is a phenomenal film.
It definitely is. I feel like, we haven't necessarily talked as much about, the side performances. I mean, you just mentioned Laura Dern. Laura Dern's really good in this film. I mean, honestly, I mean, she's kind of, for lack of a better term, her character is kind of just this bitch character, but she has to be. And it makes perfect sense of why she is. I mean, she's a divorce lawyer. She's trying to, or attorney, I guess you would say. But she's trying to, get the most for her client. And she kind of does some things throughout the film that just make you just kind of cringe a little bit. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not. And it's
It comes from both lawyers.
It does. Well, I mean, like, I would say, because we'll get into that. I feel like her performance is more, the cringe is more or less from, like, just, why are you doing this? Whereas, when you get into Alan Alda's character, and stuff, who is, one of the divorce attorneys for Adam Driver's character, his performance is very good. And there's another scene, there's a big scene where basically it's the first, I guess, meeting of everybody with all their lawyers and everything, and they're discussing, and there's this break for lunch. And it's just, you see everybody's personality in the room.
It's my favorite scene in the film.
Honestly, it's really, really interesting. But you see just certain things of his characteristic, which is just, he just doesn't really care.
No. So let's get into the ending. Because this is kind of where I had some issues, but at the same time, maybe we shouldn't have issues with it. It's kind of left ambiguous if you're intelligent enough to understand why it's left ambiguous.
Yeah.
So basically the ending, roughly around a year later, because a lot of the events take place on Halloween, and then the ending takes place on the next Halloween. You have Scarlett Johansson's character, she has a boyfriend now. And it was foreshadowed in the beginning of the film that she wants to direct her own, basically theater work.
Yeah.
And, she ends up, you just have a nice little throwaway line that she's now directing her own play, and she has a boyfriend. I didn't like that she had the boyfriend. I just think it kind of went against the character development you had, but at the same time, the fact that she had a boyfriend might be admitting that she was the more flawed character. It depends on the director's intention, for me, on whether this is flawed or not.
Well, I feel like that is the intention, in my opinion. I don't have a problem for having a boyfriend, because I feel like that's kind of what I took away from it. Which is, because as the film starts, her character's this, while she, might have moments of, there might be certain,
Independence?
I would say independence. There's certain, like, I guess, negatives about her and stuff. But it's really focused, I'd say, in the beginning of the film, that she is in the right. And she's this, perfect angel. And as the film goes on, you tend to see that's not actually the case. So I feel like that was intentional to make her the more flawed character, because I feel like that's supposed to be what it is to an extent.
I was hoping, but at the same time, nowadays a lot of directors come out and be like, oh, no. So it's better that you don't explain your work.
Yeah.
But, maybe you could have added a little context to it.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, per se. But I like that they left it kind of open.
Mm-hmm. Because it does leave you with the question, whose side are you on?
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So, rating. What would you give it?
I'm going to be a little bold here, and I know you disagree with this. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. I actually, I don't normally give these out, willy-nilly, and I know you don't either. But honestly, it's a really impactful film. The acting's phenomenal. The pacing is good. I actually like the soundtrack of it too, to be honest. Mm-hmm. The symbolism is great. I mean, the cinematography is really good. I really like the cinematography.
Yeah,
we didn't even talk about that.
Yeah, there's great shot. Well, that kind of goes with symbolism in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but even more, because symbolism I feel like goes a little bit deeper than just the cinematography. But you know what I'm saying?
Because you have certain shots,
exactly,
and that have clear meaning to them.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just fucking around with the camera.
Yeah, that's true. But I feel like it's really impactful. It's a really, really damn good film. It's a really great way to end the year, because this came out like 3 weeks ago.
I know I watched it a week ago.
So did I. But again, though, it's really, really damn good. I do really recommend it. And for me personally, it's a 5 out of 5.
I mean, I wouldn't go 5. I think there are some flaws. Very smidgen flaws, though. I'd go 4.9. Easily, you know, I think it's the only Netflix film I actually have liked so far. Bird Box was trash. Fucking The Irishman I have yet to see, which we will watch that eventually. But it's one of the few times that I feel like people were right about liking a Netflix film.
Well, I feel like a big problem with Netflix films is that it's kind of looked down upon, so I feel like they haven't necessarily had the ideas or the projects. Like, this is probably one of the first projects. Yeah. And it's because Noah Baumbach, I believe it's Noah Baumbach who directed, was willing to make this, for the budget that would be appropriate for Netflix. So this is the type of film that Netflix should do. Something that's within their budget. So I just don't necessarily think they have the money to go out and do like a huge like Star Warsy or Marvel type of like budget movie. Which I don't think it necessarily needs to do that either, though.
Well, I always say the smaller the budget, the better the film, most times. Some of my favorite films have no budget. I'm not a blockbuster studio person, so, it's like the Before trilogy. To me, it's the greatest trilogy of all time, and those were made for pennies. It's just dialogue.
Yeah.
And this film had some great dialogue, too. So
definitely does.
That'll about do it. So we're both in agreement. This is a must-see film.
Yeah, definitely do.
And watch it with your loved ones.
So you can see where you're going in 10 years.
Yep. They got the psychology right, so you might as well take notes about it.